Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by the man whose biggest question is, will he ever win the Pick'em show? Kyle, how are you doing?
That was a little uncalled for, but I'm doing good. Gonna win the
It's your
Pick'em
biggest
show this
question.
year.
It is what it is.
I'm blocking out the haters. I'm gonna win this year. I'm not worried about it.
I mean, 0 for 3. It's getting a little tough. It's almost like a Buffalo Bills type situation.
I've been in the lead at times throughout the years, and I've been behind at times throughout the years. I'm never gonna change. I'm gonna find a way to win one. All I need to do is get the Super Bowl right.
That's true. Yeah, you get one. The flags fly forever.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
Yes. Kyle, today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about every AFC team's just biggest question. What's their biggest question? What is, maybe what the season is, hindering on, or just, a fascinating topic of discussion throughout. Should be an interesting video as we're, getting to the point where soon we will be doing our previews.
Yeah, we're getting to the point where we start to look at this really tight. It's going to be we're breaking down all these rosters. We're going to talk about some of the guys on the fringes and what does that mean for the teams this season. So we're getting close to that point. Got a few more questions I think to answer this off season, and then we could start collectively losing our minds about our picks.
Yeah. Right. Should mention next week we will do the NFC. That's the way this works. Also coming at you at a weird time, 9:00 this time. We had to do it this week due to life getting in the way and stuff like that. But we will be back at 5 next week, so that'll be our typical time. But for now, 9 is what we're doing. So you want to just get into it?
Yeah, let's dive right in. Are we going same order we did for the last couple weeks?
I believe so. Yeah. So I have the AFC East, then North, then South, and then West.
Yep, that's what I got. Let's do it.
Okay. So let's start off with the Buffalo Bills. Why don't we? My biggest question is, can Josh Allen carry this Bills offense? I think this is kind of an underrated, maybe a bit of a tough situation that the Bills currently have. I don't love this offensive line. Obviously, Diggs is very good. I like Gabe Davis, but I still have some concerns about their receiver depth on top of it. So this offense really feels very Josh Allen dependent. And now he can certainly carry them to some degree, but my question is just how much?
Yeah. I didn't, I tried not to go quarterback for every team. So I didn't want a quarterback-centered question, but mine's kind of the same vein of who is the next step playmaker to step up, because they need one badly. And I'm not overly, although we're hearing some weird stuff about Stephon Diggs potentially this preseason. We'll see how that all plays out. But, Gabriel Davis, is he ever going to be better than, I think he's solid, but is he any better than what he is? They're going to hope to find somebody new for that slot position. And then it's Damian Harris, James Cook, kind of a rotating backfield. They drafted Dalton Kincaid. They really need somebody else to take some pressure, I think, off Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, or we're going to need a mammoth Josh Allen season where he's an MVP. Like you were saying, can he carry this team? So it's going to be one or the other. Can he carry this team the distance? Can he do that? Can he play at the highest level he can consistently throughout a season? Because we see the glimpses. We've said it before on this podcast. At his very best, there may not be a better quarterback than Josh Allen in the game. At his very best. But it's not consistent enough to be considered the best in the game, and that's our biggest problem with Josh Allen as a whole. Or if not, do we have a secondary receiver who could really step up? Could Gabriel Davis take another small leap? Can Dalton Kincaid be a real playmaker this season? How's that going to look?
Yeah, I agree. And, I should mention, I also tried to not pick quarterback, because you really could pick quarterback for every single, team if you wanted to. So I tried to just save it for when it was really good. But to me, I think we're both kind of on the same page, even if we just phrased it differently. It's more about the, is Khalil Shakir going to step up next year? Is Trent Sherfield, who I thought showed flashes in Miami last year, is he going to have a good season? Stuff like that. Is can the receiving core really round out? And also, again, I don't love this offensive line. So that's my question is, and again, a question isn't just this is bad. A question also means there's a chance it could be good. There's a chance those guys could step up, which is why it's a fascinating topic of discussion.
Yeah. And obviously the big thing is this, it's not like this is going to be a make or break thing to this seems good or bad. But the question is, can the Buffalo Bills win a Super Bowl? Which is obviously what their goal is. And
Mhm.
they're close. They are close. I mean, despite how it's ended the past few seasons, I still think they're pretty close to Kansas City and Cincinnati. So this is just the stuff on the fringes. It's going to be the difference between them losing in the second round again or them potentially winning a Super Bowl. And it's going to be someone like Dalton Kincaid having a couple big catches in the playoffs or Gabriel Davis coming up with another big game.
Yeah. And breaking news. The Deagle in the chat saying, I heard Kyle is replacing Shannon Sharp on Undisputed. Kyle, congratulations.
Oh, man. We're still running with this bit? Not happening, man. Not
Wow,
happening.
our sources, Kyle's refuting the sources, but who knows what is actually happening behind closed doors of Kyle and Skip Bayless. The Miami Dolphins, next up on the list. I have Xavier Howard as my biggest question. A guy who,
Okay.
at his best, has been an all-pro caliber player, but we've seen real inconsistency from him. And I'm betting on him to have a good year in the Vic Fangio scheme. I think that's going to help him out a lot. And I think he's going to bounce back. But that's a huge question because if he does bounce back and if he is an all-pro level player with Jalen
Yeah.
Ramsey being the number one corner, this is a Super Bowl contending team potentially. To me, a lot of it rests on Xavier Howard.
Yeah. Once again, we're kind of in the same vein. I didn't highlight Xavier Howard specifically, but he's a huge part of this because that's what he does. Can this team succeed? Can this defense succeed without turnovers? And I think that was a big thing that happened last year that we kind of forgot about. Like,
Mhm.
yes, we gave it a large pass because the secondary got so hurt by the end of the year. And I think a lot of that was fair. Like, there was a lot of injuries to that secondary last season. But we also talked about how good this defense was in 2021 and 2020, 2019. In 2021, they were ninth in turnovers. In 2020, they were first in turnovers by a pretty good margin, too, if I'm not mistaken. Last year, they were second to last. So I
Mhm.
think that played a pretty huge part in that defense's success. And Xavier Howard's one of those guys. He's a ball hawk back there. He thrives on turnovers and making plays with on the ball. So can this defense succeed without turnovers is my biggest question. Because I mean, maybe they get the turnover luck again. Maybe they're top five in takeaways this season, and it's all fine. They're going to be a great defense. But if they're middle of the pack, can this defense succeed?
Yeah.
And
The other
can
question,
Howard succeed?
right? The other question about the Dolphins that I also considered, but again, trying to avoid quarterbacks, but it's Tua's health and how Tua stays healthy. I think that's going to be something we're all going to look at closely.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it too. I mean,
Mhm.
this offense was electric when he played, and you know, mediocre-ish when he didn't. So, they're going to need him on the field to stay healthy. That's how they're going to win games. Once again, it's one of those things where, yeah, if Tua is healthy, they win a lot of games. But I think a lot of it is this defense has to be a lot better for this team to compete with the very best.
Yeah. Kyle, what about your team? What was your biggest question heading into the 2023 season?
Like I said, I wasn't going to do quarterback for every team, but I do feel like quarterback's the biggest question with the
You have
Patriots.
to do it here.
Yeah, it's will the real Mac Jones please stand up?
Hmm.
There was a lot of promise going to his rookies after his rookie season. He looked very good in his rookie season. His numbers wouldn't blow you away, but a there was a pathway that looked like you were going to at least have a pretty decent quarterback in that spot. Last year was a disaster. There's been a lot written, a lot talked about, and everyone's gone ad nauseum about how bad the offensive system was last season. So he gets another chance here in year 3. Can it be fixed? Can this work? He's going to have a lot less excuses if it doesn't work this season because the offensive line gets a little more experience this year. I actually like this offensive line because they didn't go out and get a star like McGlinchey or anybody at tackle, but they got 3 really nice tackles in that room all of a sudden. Basically for the price of one. Their interior gets a lot better as well. They still have, they actually upgraded at tight end. So there's not a lot of excuses left for him. And the biggest one, obviously, is they're going to have a competent play caller this season, someone who knows how to scheme and knows how to script plays. So there's no excuses for Mac to fail. And can he fail? Can he succeed or will he fail again? I think it's going to be the biggest question.
Yeah, hard to argue. You know, hard to argue anything else. I think that we kind of know what I feel. I feel pretty confident what this Patriots team is going to be outside of the quarterback position, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for this defense this year.
Hmm.
I'm really excited to see there's been a lot of good talk about Christian Gonzalez in OTAs, Take it with a grain of salt. Only
Mhm.
OTAs. But he's also someone I had as my number one corner in the draft. So it's not like I'm like rewriting history with saying, "Oh, I'm excited for Christian Gonzalez." I liked him in the draft process too, and I think he's going to be a really talented player. This team develops talent at the secondary position really well. There's a lot of speed that they haven't had in recent years in this defense. I like that. I like some of the moves they made at pass catcher spots. I think they got a pretty decent roster, but quarterback kind of drives the market in this game. Quarterback is the most important position, and we've seen really good teams fail with bad quarterbacks. So it's the biggest question for this team.
Speaking of really good teams failing with bad quarterbacks, that was the Jets situation last year. How's that for a transition?
That was
That's
good.
been a Jets issue several times. To me, I was looking down this roster, and it's a very good roster. There's not a ton of issues. I thought maybe tackle that could use a tackle like that could be one of their biggest question marks. I kind of wonder how Aaron Rodgers is going to fit in here. To me, that feels like the biggest question. And again, I know it's quarterback. I know it's kind of an easy narrative, but I think that's the question is how is Aaron Rodgers not necessarily is he going to play, how well is he going to play? I think he'll still play well, but just how is the fit going to work and how is he going to be able to learn the system and all of that stuff? And it's not necessarily learn the system because it's Hackett, but fit in with the new players and stuff like that.
I mean, who is it that said I'm on undisputed now? The Deagle. I can go full undisputed here with this segment and Aaron
Okay.
Rodgers. Like,
Hmm.
you used to hear back in the day when it came to baseball, especially because baseball was king in the mid 2000s, early 2000s, that sort of thing. The conversation on baseball was, can you handle the pressure of New York?
Hmm.
It's a different sort of market than everywhere else. It's a different sort of atmosphere than everywhere else. And I mean, let's be honest, if you're going to judge Aaron Rodgers over the last couple seasons, the way he's handled the media, the way he's talked to the media, it didn't seem like someone who would really want to sign up for New York.
Right.
I think that's a
Hmm.
very clear. I don't think that's a wild accusation to say. So can he? There's going to be a lot of scrutiny under his game, a lot of scrutiny under his performance, and there's going to be a lot of games too where he plays well and they lose, and it's not his fault, and he's still going to get scrutiny for it. So I think that's going to be a big question for him. Along your point, I agree with that. How is he going to fit in, not just with this team, with this scheme, with this system, but how is he going to fit in with this environment, playing for this team? Not that the Packers are like small market or it is a small market. Not that the Packers are like this tiny franchise. Obviously, it's one of the winningest franchises in NFL history that has a lot of pedigree. But there's also a different level of pressure playing for a New York team, even if it is the Jets.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Hmm.
My question actually was, can the offensive line help Aaron Rodgers too?
Hmm.
I do think this roster is pretty good. I don't think this offensive line is very good though, and especially it seems like I don't know who to bet on to be healthy for this offensive line. So I do think Aaron Rodgers and quarterbacks like him. I think Brady did this too. They add a huge amount of help to an offensive line just because they manipulate defensive lines with their calls, with their cadence, all that kind of stuff. Everything that gives them their offensive line a little bit more of an advantage. But Aaron Rodgers not as fleet of foot as he used to be. He's not going to be able to evade rushers as well as he did it in his prime. How can this offensive line keep him up?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it's one of those things where if it's healthy, it wouldn't necessarily be that bad. I like their guards of Laken Tomlinson and Elijah Vera Tucker. But Mekhi Becton, who he could never stay healthy. Dwayne Brown's collecting Social Security, and then you have the center of Joe Tippmann, who's was a second round pick, and I didn't love him as a second round pick. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if they're all healthy and all live up to their potential, this could be a really good offensive line, actually. But that feels like a big question.
Yeah. Um, we need some big performances. And I mean, I really love Mekhi Becton in the draft process, but I can't bank on him to stay healthy at this point.
Yeah, completely agree. Let's move on. Let's go to the AFC North now. We're going with the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati Bengals, who I am going with their young secondary players. Feels like
Mhm.
year after year, we're kind of like this secondary feels like it's kind of just getting patched together a little bit. It has some concerns. It hasn't really been a huge issue yet, but Cam Taylor Britt had a very inconsistent rookie year. Definitely, not a bad rookie year, but can he really? I think he's the main guy that I'm interested in. Can he come in and just be a good number two corner? Because if he can, You have Awuzie, who I think should be good. You have, Mike Helton, who can be a third corner there. They should be good as long as Taylor Britt can come in and be, do what he did sort of towards the end of last year for Cincinnati.
We are lockstep on this one. I said, can the young players in the secondary step into the spotlight? Because it's not going to be easy for them. They got some tests this year. And Cam Taylor-Britt, I think, is a huge part of that. He's going to, I thought he was really good for a rookie, and I thought by the end of the year he was playing really good ball. I thought, there was some lumps along the way, but that's expected for a young corner. So I thought that was a big part of it, but this team also had the best safety duo in football. Now you could say, how important is the safety duo? But I do think with the way Anarumo ran this defense and kept those guys deep, and they were protecting these corners at all costs, especially when Awuzie went down. How is this team going to succeed without Von Bell and Jesse Bates? Daxton Hill's another guy they drafted very highly, have big expectations for. I guess it's going to be Nick Scott at safety. So it's just going to be, how is that duo going to perform? It's going to be a big question.
Well, I mean, you can't bet against Nick Scott. I mean, are you kidding me?
I think you can. I think it'd be safe to, have some questions there.
The great Nick Scott?
Yeah. I mean, outside of that, because that's the thing, though, right? Like, you could say, like, oh, how does Irv Smith replace Hayden Hurst? That's not a very exciting question. I think that's not a very important question either. You could also say, like, the tale as old as time. Can this offensive line hold up? I think this offensive line is going to be fine. I think it's going to be pretty good. It really just comes down to this defense succeeded with their secondary not making mistakes, and half of that secondary is now gone. How do they prevent that from making mistakes?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely fascinating to see what happens there. Let's go to the Ravens. The Ravens, who to me their biggest question is, and I'm going first for all these. I apologize, but that's just how I do this. I'll throw some to you in a second. My question is their receiving core. Which has been the question of the Ravens for really, it hasn't been a question for a while. It seems like with the Ravens, because just we knew it was going to be bad heading into the season. This is the first year I feel like it's a legitimate question of how good is it going to be. It could be actually good if everyone lives up to their potential. You added Odell. I like Devin Duvernay. I liked Rashad Bateman when he's on the field. It's like there could be some really good players, and this could be really successful, but there still is a lot of questions there. I don't feel great, but really any specific receiver other than Mark Andrews, who isn't a receiver, honestly, maybe the two guys I feel most comfortable with saying, yeah, they're going to be good next year are both tight ends, Andrews and Likely. So that's not to say that, I'm assuming someone else will play good, whether it's Bateman, Odell, or someone else, but it's a huge question.
Yeah. It feels almost too good to be true right now, right? Like we've been saying for years and years, why can't this team add skill position talent? Why can't they get more, more dynamic on the edge? And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, they've assembled this really good offensive line. They had this weird situation with Lamar Jackson in the offseason. And instead of, punting on it and saying, okay, we'll trade Lamar because he wants to be traded and, start over, they go and get Odell Beckham. They go and add Zay Flowers. And all of a sudden Lamar Jackson's back on board. He played this right, it seems like. So, yeah, I mean, the question I have is this offense now good enough to win in the postseason? Because the question is, I guess, if they're good and they win a lot of games in the regular season but fall short in the postseason, what's next? How do you fix this next? I think that's the biggest question I have going forward. But they've assembled this roster. Now the questions are going to be like, is Odell Beckham still good enough to be the guy? He was still pretty good when he was with Los Angeles. Even though he was a number 2, he was still pretty good. That was a knee injury ago, though. Is Dave Flowers ready to step into the spotlight? A lot of people really liked him in the draft process. Bateman's shown some real flashes. Can these guys come together and form a competent receiving core? It is a big question.
Yeah, and we have seen Odell struggle. With the Browns, he never found a chemistry with Baker. Now, maybe that's just Baker Mayfield. That was a weird thing. I don't know. But we have seen history of him not fitting with certain guys as well. So it's again, I'm not betting against it. I'm just saying we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, there's still questions here. Zay Flowers is not 100% knockout pick, right? There is a chance it doesn't work. And Odell Beckham had a knee injury and is not getting, he's on the wrong side of 30 at this point. You know, can those guys hold up and, make this work? And Bateman's got to stay on the field too. So it's a tough look for the Ravens, but also this is probably the most excited they have to be about a receiving core in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. You could also go with the cornerback depth for the Ravens, but it's the Ravens. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm not too worried. Rock Ya-Sin's going to play at like a top 10 corner level somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go to the Steelers. Kyle, who do you have what's your biggest question for the Steelers?
Can a real number one option make the leap? They've assembled a nice they've accumulated a nice level of talent on the offensive side of the ball, right? Like you just go through the list and it's like, okay, they've drafted pretty well at receiver with Deontay Johnson, George Pinkins, Pat Fryermuth. They wanted Najee Harris to kind of be that number one guy, that bell cow that hasn't really worked out the way they wanted. They bring in Allen Robinson, which I think is a good flyer. But can one of these guys, take that leap to the next level? Because a lot of games are won on the outside now, man, and they need one of those guys to kind of perform and do something relevant. So that was my biggest question. I do have a few other questions. Can Joey Porter Jr. and Patrick Peterson hold up? Is that good enough cornerback duo? And is that a stable enough cornerback duo? But I do think the number one option on offense has to happen most.
Yeah, that's a good one. Hey, maybe could we get an Allen Robinson, return and have him play decently well? I don't know, probably not, but there's some options here, I suppose. I still went with Kenny Pickett. I think that the next potential decade of this team could revolve around Kenny Pickett. So I think that his development and what does he do after having a good rookie year? How does he develop forward from here? To me, that still is the most fascinating question for the Steelers.
Yeah, and I think his performances were better than his numbers indicated, but still, you want those numbers to get a little better too. So we want to see a little bit of a leap here in year two, and I think also a pass catcher would help. I've staked my claim that I think George Pickens has superstar potential. I think that he could make this leap this year, but they really need to see that leap. It can't be theoretical.
I thought also about saying, could TJ Watt finally play as good as Myles Garrett, just to let the comments section, go out.
Yeah, we're gonna clip that out for you and post that online. That's what's gonna happen. But
Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting because I do like this Steelers team. I like what they're doing. I like how they're building this roster. But I do think this year I just have some questions. Is it too soon to expect too much out of George Pickens? And they lost talent in that secondary. Can that secondary hold up? All of this is going to be questions, I think, heading into next season.
Yeah, it blows my mind still that the Steelers won 9 games last year, right? That still doesn't sound right.
Especially when they started Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, intentionally, like not because of an injury.
Yeah, that was on purpose.
Yeah, exactly. The Cleveland Browns to round out the AFC North. Again, I'm going quarterback here. It's the only I believe it's the only other quarterback I have left on my list. Spoiler alert. But I mean, how can it not be Deshaun Watson here?
Yeah, that was my number one question. I had another one that I was thinking about, and it was like, maybe if I don't want to do quarterback here, I could do it. Maybe I'll ask it at the end here. But yeah, I mean, they have to fix this situation. They have to hope he's back. That after a preseason, after an offseason where he's able to work out with the team, everything is fixed because they've invested far too much to get the 35th rated quarterback at a 39 on PFF's rankings, right?
Mm-hmm.
They paid for a top 5 quarterback and getting top 39 quarterback. That's not acceptable. So they have to get this better. I said last season, I basically giving him a pass. I think I said it after his first game that I'm just not caring about Browns games for the rest of the year. We'll see how it looks next year. And I gave him a pass. But now he's got to perform because now he's the $250 million man with expectations. So that is going to be the biggest question for them this year.
Yeah, if he comes in and just sucks, like what do you do?
You can't do anything. You traded 3 first rounders and you paid him $250 million guaranteed. You're screwed.
Yeah,
you're actually screwed.
Yeah, no, it's completely it's completely up. That's by far and away. I mean, it's literally a franchise question. Fred is altering question for the next like 3-4 years, at least.
Yeah, And this was a team that was like, close. We really liked how this team was building its roster and what they were doing. And they scrapped a lot of that to put it all in on Deshaun, which the last time we saw Deshaun play absolutely would have been worth it. But we haven't seen that guy in a few years. It's still there.
Yeah, I guess the other, there's some smaller questions like could Denzel Ward have a bounce back year? That would be that's I think another guy who's kind of been up and down. What will we see out of him next year? That's another smaller question.
Well, I said, what the hell happened to the defense?
Uh
Because
huh.
like I know they were another team that had some injuries last year, but that roster was still too talented to suck.
Yeah.
And they really stunk on defense, and I didn't get it. And yet, I know Myles Garrett had the accident before the season, and I think it hurt him a little bit, although he was still the number one graded edge rusher, so obviously didn't hurt that much. But
Hmm.
there was still way too much talent in that defense to be as bad as it was, even beyond him. So Ward is a big part of that, but they've added Dalvin Tomlinson and Zadarius Smith. They've added, this is a good team all of a sudden all over again. This is gonna be this is probably gonna be a team where if Watson has a good preseason, they're probably gonna become the trendy Super Bowl pick.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. What'd you do for the Jaguars?
I just said was the end of last season real or a fluke?
Hmm.
Not really roster things like the edge rushers, the pass rush is still I think the biggest roster question for this year. And we touched on that last 2 weeks ago when we did their offseason grade. I do think that's the biggest positional question is can they get a pass rush? But I just, we've seen teams find a groove at the end of a regular season, go on a little bit of a run, and then we get really excited for them for next season, saying this is the year they make the leap. We're putting them in the Super Bowl conversation. This is the time where all these young guys come together, and then it kind of just falls flat, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that team went 8-9, and then they traded all their best players." Not that they're
Hmm.
going to like trade Trevor Lawrence or anything, but can't was the end of last season and the way they performed real? Was that a fluke? Can they do it? And they should dominate this division based on what we saw the last 4 or 5 games of the season last year. They should dominate this division. Can they go and do that?
Yeah, I think people kind of forget the AFC South was the worst division in football last year. It was worse than the NFC South.
Yeah.
But the difference was kind of the Jaguars. They felt like they were, they won their last 5 games of the season, so it sort of felt like they were, hot at the right time and a better team heading into the playoffs than winning a playoff game after being down a billion points as well. Certainly, helps with that. For me, my biggest question is Trayvon Walker. I think that you touched on it, but it's just we predicted he was going to be a project. He wasn't going to come into the league and dominate right away. Fuck, he was way too raw of a player. But now you've had a year. And now it's like, okay, what can we see from you? I don't need him to come in and be a superstar right away. I don't need that to happen from him. But for me to really feel okay about him as a player, I at least need to see something this year.
Yeah, I mean it's a big question. They've invested a lot of resources in him. The number one pick, in fact. That
Hmm.
is a big ask. You really need that. There's not a lot of teams that can say they blew the number one pick and still turned out okay.
Right.
And they could have blown this pick. And that's a huge problem because it's their biggest position in need right now too. It's not like it's it's not like a receiver they could hide or anything. Pass rush and the ability to get to the quarterback outside of Josh Allen, who's terrific, you know, that's their biggest position in need, and they haven't addressed it outside of hoping that Trayvon Walker gets better.
Yeah, and we'll see if he does. And again, great power beats up on bad players. That's the first step.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to beat up on the bad players and then get a little better against the good players and then dominate the good players like you do the bad players. So, yeah, I mean, it's just interesting because, they are the trendy pick this offseason, and they were 2-6 at one point last year, man. Like, it could have easily have gone just as south, and they don't make the playoffs. And then what are we talking about Jacksonville this year? We're not calling them division favorites.
Right, definitely. Let's go to the Titans, why don't we? Titans, my biggest question for them is there's I mean, there's several questions you could have. I have the offensive line though. The offensive line, and my question isn't will it be good, because it won't, but could it be not terrible?
Huh. I don't even know if that's realistic. They paid a
Yeah,
lot of money to Andre Dillard, who is not not very good. You know,
no,
he was, if you're bad on the Philadelphia offensive line, you're really bad. That's
yeah.
just kind of my opinion.
uh,
Um, but that's too mean. They drafted Skoronski, who I think could help a little bit, which, maybe the interior with him, with Brunskill, is good enough to hold this team up. And, Okonkwo is also, a pretty good blocking tight end, I think, too. So it's just like you have some things there. So maybe it's not a disaster, but I still think, like you said, it's going to be bad and it's not going to help. I said, what if this is the year Derrick Henry falls off the cliff?
mm-hmm,
Because it's coming. Like, as
mm-hmm,
much as we love Derrick Henry, and it's marvelous to watch him play football because he's so, it's so almost like, to steal a basketball term, he's like a unicorn. He's giant. He's built
yeah,
like a defensive lineman,
mm-hmm,
and he can run like a safety. So,
mm-hmm.
it's a special blend of talent there, and he's been good for so long. And once again, he was the 7th best running back in football last year by PFF standards. So if you go back the last, 5 years, he's 2nd, 7th, 1st, 17th, and then 7th. So, like, I don't know what happens if this is all of a sudden it, because we've seen he's never been a big yards per carry guy, but we've seen it progressively get a little bit worse, a little bit worse, a little bit worse. What if this is the year he can't break those tackles? What if this is the year he doesn't get that extra burst, that extra 5 yards? Because, I mean, if it doesn't happen for him this year, this could be the worst offense in football, because it's all built around his success.
Yeah, and it's different than, they had that year where Henry got hurt, and the Titans still were able to. I felt like they looked worse, but they still got the 1 seed that year.
Yeah.
But I think I think that team could kind of afford a key injury much more than this team can. And I'm not to say that, he would get injured, but if he falls off a cliff, I think it would hurt them more this season. Yeah, it's a real concern. On the flip side, though, we talk about the Jaguars as clear favorites. Can't we just see sort of, and maybe the biggest question is, can Mike Vrabel pull Mike Tomlin here and kind of just find a way to, we've seen him kind of get his team to sort of win games, or at least be in games they had no business winning. Could this be a scenario where he could maybe really show what kind of coach he is?
This really is the Miami Heat of the NFL. Like, this team just doesn't die.
Uh-huh.
Would I be so basically? Are you saying would I be shocked if this team wins 10 games and is in the playoffs as the 4th seed? No, I
Sure.
wouldn't. No,
Mhm.
I would not, because
Yeah.
this team doesn't die. And I don't. I say that with admiration. I don't say that as a knock, because it's because they're really well coached. They're really well disciplined, and they just kind of do the right things. They do things the right way. And you know what? For all the talk about the offense, the defense is probably going to be nasty next year. This looks like a really good
Mhm.
defense that's built too. So, yeah, I think they can lean on their defense and win a lot of football games next year. But it's just hard to see them doing anything on offense if Henry's not healthy. Because, like you said, 2 years ago he got hurt. Dante Foreman ended up working out. He was a godsend for them as a backup running back. They still had AJ Brown. They don't have those pieces anymore. Now, maybe their depth pieces still work. Maybe Treylon Burks all of a sudden is a stud that they were hoping he would be. Maybe one of these backup running backs ends up carrying the load and doing just fine. But, how many times is that going to keep working for you? Especially when you built your whole offense around this guy's skill set.
Yeah. We have a chat. How are the Titans consistently the most boring team year in and year out? It's really remarkable. No one does it like Tennessee.
Yeah. I mean, they have their brand, that's for sure.
Mhm.
It's not making the number one screen on Sunday Ticket very often, but it wins football games. That's all they care about.
Yeah, hey, they'll gladly be boring and win. They basically were in the playoffs last year before Dobbs fumbled the football and it was a defensive touchdown. I mean,
Yeah.
they probably should have won that game and won the division last year.
Yeah. And that could also circle back to our Jaguars question. They were a Josh Dobbs mistake away from missing the playoffs entirely. And they were
Yeah.
also a Chargers collapse away from getting blown out in the playoffs. So,
Hmm.
I think all that kind of ties together.
Yep, definitely. But they also had players who made those plays, so it goes both ways.
Yeah.
What you have for the Colts here?
Just how long is this franchise going to be patient? This, for all the fun, I make fun of the Colts because it was a rivalry at one point. And it was a fun rivalry. We had
Hmm.
Brady and Manning going at each other. So let's not act like it wasn't good years. It was mostly good years for me, but you had some too. Um,
2006. Yeah, there you go.
yeah.
Hmm.
But look, I mean, I do think this offensive line is going to be a lot better next year. I do think Jonathan Taylor is going to be better next year. I like Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman. So I've gone through all this. I do think that they can be a little bit better, but this is just a team that historically has not been bad or not had, decently high expectations at least. So, they were willing when Peyton Manning got hurt to say, you know what, we're going to throw away this season. And it worked out because they got a generational quarterback out of that equation. They weren't prepared to be bad last year, and they were bad, and it didn't work out. They drafted Anthony Richardson, who I think the consensus across the board was he's super talented. He's going to take more time than any other of those first year quarterbacks.
Hmm.
All those rookies, he was going to take the most time to develop. Is this team willing to, you know, be kind of bad another season to make sure Richardson gets the development he needs to be ready to be a good player in the future? You know, it, if Richardson, struggles to start, then show sign of life and they win 5 games, are they content with that? Or are they going to be looking to change course again?
Yeah, here's what I would do if I were the Colts. Weeks like 1 through 4, I'm giving Jonathan Taylor 40 carries a game. Let's bolster up that trade stock, trade him for as much as I can, and then just lose a bunch of games.
Yeah, I mean that'd probably be a good strategy, but are they going to be willing to want to trade Jonathan Taylor too? That's not
Mm.
kind of outside of McCaffrey. That's not really the trades that ever happen in the NFL.
Yeah, which is weird because I feel like teams should trade. Like if you're a rebuilding team who has a good running back, that should be like the first thing you do is trade the good running back. Like that should be like,
Yeah,
okay, we're good, we're a bad team, but we have a good running back. Let's just obviously we get rid of the running back.
honestly, the NFL makes absolutely no sense with the way they utilize their trade deadline. That should be
Uh,
where you're selling. The Buffalo Bills should have had a running back at the trade deadline the last 3 years, and it
right.
feels like what? Why wouldn't they be willing? You know what? Oh, should we get Jonathan Taylor and really compete for a Super Bowl or worry about our first round pick next year? They're going to take Jonathan Taylor at the trade deadline every time over a first round pick. It's just silly.
Yeah. Jonathan Taylor is my biggest question for the Colts. Obviously 2 years ago, he was getting MVP buzz. I'm not just saying that, like, oh, some random person said he would win. He was legitimately getting MVP buzz. I believe, if you remember that famous, scandal where one of the MVP voters said he wouldn't vote for Rodgers because he doesn't like that Rodgers is a jerk for MVP. He said that it was between Cooper Cup and Jonathan Taylor for him. I believe he voted for Cooper Cup to win MVP. Weird guy. Weird situation that happened there. But
Yeah.
last year Taylor wasn't great. That's just the reality of the situation. Taylor was out there for over 500 snaps. It's not like he didn't play last year. Maybe the injuries factored in, but if he's an MVP candidate again, this is a team that could, that's at least a very key piece. Maybe you get rid of that piece and use it to rebuild, but it's at least a very key piece and an asset you have on your team that we thought they would have last year and didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a weird year. I don't understand it because, I just think you look across the board at this team, like, you don't view any of these offensive linemen as bad either, but they
Hmm.
all didn't play up to our standards for them.
Right.
When did you ever expect to say Quentin Nelson was the 20th best guard in football?
Right.
Like, that just felt unheard of.
Hmm.
So it's just like, if you look through that roster, it should be a lot better on the offense of the ball than it was last season. And especially like Michael Pittman, I thought made a substantial leap. Alec Pierce, I thought supplied some nice flashes for a rookie. And our biggest question for the Colts for years was pass catcher. And now it feels like the only sure thing, which makes no sense.
Right, definitely. To round out the AFC South, what did you have for the Texans?
I just said, how can they maximize CJ Stroud? You know,
Hmm.
the only thing that matters is they need good quarterback play this year. They don't need to win games. They don't need to worry about winning games yet. They need to focus on developing this team and developing the young players on it. And there are a lot of young players on this team. You know, John Mechie is going to be a guy who's featuring on this team at receiver. Damian Pierce had a very good rookie year at running back. There's rookies on the offensive line. There's young players across the board, and the youngest of which is CJ Stroud, who they're starting at quarterback. And, you know, I think everybody kind of looked at it. They also had Kenyon Green, too, who was the worst rated offensive guard last year, but they took in the first round in 2022.
Hmm.
So that's not good. So yeah, I mean, CJ Stroud is going to have to succeed in this offense, and they got to figure out a way to allow him to succeed with not a lot of talent. How can they protect this kid? How can they not just throw him into the fire or, throw him into the deep end and hope he's able to swim? I guess is probably the better metaphor for that. How can they protect him at least a little bit and give him a life raft?
Yeah, good stuff. I went to fact check you on the youngest player, and yeah, by a month, younger than Willie Anderson. There you go, CJ Stroud. Kyle, you know your stuff.
Uh, I prep a little bit. I put an hour in.
Yeah, there you go. I also had, can they put Stroud in a position to succeed? I think that's the question. The Brandon Cooks trade, I think, made all of us kind of say, well, what are we doing here, Houston? But luckily, we know that Houston always has a plan, and they're an organization you can trust that they know what they're doing.
Uh, I've railed on Houston too much this offseason. I can't make fun of them anymore. That being said, like for a team that's been notoriously impatient with this rebuild and firing coaches year after year, they went with a young quarterback and they went with a young head coach. Like you got to give these guys at least 2 or 3 years, and they have to give Stroud 2 years because they traded their first round pick. They can't re-up with the quarterback next year, so they have to give these guys a chance to succeed, and it's going to be hard to succeed. It's going to be really hard to succeed for the next couple years.
Yeah, we'll see where they go. Even if Stroud hits, I think they might be, still in a bit of a tough spot. But
A
that would
four-win
definitely
season is a success next year if Stroud's good, and
possibly.
that's probably what's going to happen.
Hey, one of the nice things is typically when you're rebuilding, you root for your team to lose, but now you have no reason to do that because you gave away your first round pick.
What a shit show! Oh gosh, this is going to be a disaster.
Let's move on. Kansas City Chiefs. From one of the team, two very different. I mean, man, think about the way that these two teams have gone in that 24-0 game. When the Chiefs came back, really, I mean, one has gone just straight up, the other has gone straight into the ground. Kansas City Chiefs. Listen, a lot of good stuff with the Chiefs. The Chiefs' expectations are winning a Super Bowl. If they go to a Super Bowl and lose, it's a bad year for them at this point. My question is their tackles. They went out and paid Jawan Taylor a lot of money, a ton of money, very much money for Jawan Taylor. Also, it looks like Donovan Smith is slated to be a starter as well. Don't love that.
Yeah, that's concerning. Like I said, we touched on this a little 2 weeks ago too. He is a better pass blocker, but it's a lot different pass blocking for Brady than it is Patrick Mahomes. One's
Mhm.
going to throw the ball quickly, and one is quite simply just not.
Right. Mhm.
So it's a different situation. That being said, I see the plan, but the problem is their plan involves paying not good players money. And I
Mhm.
never love doing that. So yeah, I see the concerns with the tackles. I see the concerns here, and we're just gonna see if it works because we've spent a lot of time questioning this in the offseason. But you could also probably say nobody coaches offensive line better than Andy Reid over the last 2 decades of football, right? So we're gonna test his mettle and his staff's mettle of being able to work this group because Jawan Taylor is athletically phenomenal. He really is. But we haven't seen it translate into good football before. Is it going to work in Kansas City? It could. I wouldn't be shocked if it works because they are that good at everything. But we just haven't seen these guys play good before.
Yeah. Jeremy says that Smith and Taylor are greater than Brown and Wiley. I think Andrew Wiley might be the second best player out of those four. Am, am I wrong? I don't think that's a crazy take.
uh, maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean,
It depends
I
on
think
how
I,
much you value Jawan Taylor, who just can't run block, but is a good, is like a, like what, a top, like a B level pass blocker.
yeah, I think I take Taylor because
Hmm.
they're not going to run the ball. So who
Yeah.
cares?
Uh-huh. But he's still not. I get it. Taylor, and I do agree. I think Taylor in this system is going to be. He's going to have probably his best year for Kansas City. Still don't know if you pay $20 million a year for that, but I think he's going to be a fine player for them. The Donovan Smith is just a total wild card. Also, apparently they're going to have like I've heard that they're thinking about having Jawan Taylor play left tackle and Donovan Smith play right tackle. Why are we doing this?
Wait, what? No, that makes no sense. They never played those sides. I don't know. We'll
Why
see
are
how
we-
that goes. Good luck to you. I mean, maybe Andy Reid's a genius. I mean, he is a genius, but
Yeah,
maybe he just is more of a genius than everybody else.
yeah,
Um,
we'll see.
my question for Kansas City is: can this team continue to hit on the fringes? Because there's one of those things where, you know what, they have Patrick Mahomes. With Patrick Mahomes, they're probably going to be Super Bowl contenders for the next decade. But I think one of these things that we keep talking about when it comes to dynasties and continued success is teams' abilities to hit on the fringes. Because guess what? I witnessed it for 20 years. The Patriots hit on the fringes all the time. And that's how they kept winning Super Bowls and kept competing for championships and kept being
Mhm.
at the highest level. The second they stopped hitting on the fringes, they stopped looking like a Super Bowl contender. And that's when Brady left. You know, they're paying a lot of money for Patrick Mahomes, rightfully earned. He is the most valuable player in the league. They're paying a lot of money on Jawan Taylor, which we just talked about is a bit of a wild card. They're paying a lot of money for Travis Kelce, rightfully earned. He's one of the best tight ends of all time. They're paying a lot of money for Chris Jones, rightfully earned. He's one of the best defensive players in the league. But part of the reason they were able to win the Super Bowl last year is everything on the fringes they nailed. They nailed their draft last year. They nailed their signings. They let Tyrann Mathieu walk. They brought in Juan Thornhill. That worked and it hit on the money. All that stuff worked over and over and over again last year. Can that stuff work this year is the biggest question. They're rolling with Valdez Scantling on the receiver spot. Can he be good enough to be that outside receiver? Can this Kadarius Toney, Rashay Rice, Sky Moore trio of receivers be a good tertiary option on the offensive side of the ball? Can George Karlaftis make another leap here, make a leap here as he's taking over this starting edge rusher position? Yes, Frank Reich was overpaid, but he was still a piece of that puzzle. Can Karlaftis step into that role? Thornhill's gone. They come in and bring in, they got a couple options there at safety. How does all that come together? If it comes to the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, all of those kind of have to work out.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, again, I'm interested in seeing like how Brian Cook kind of. I'm assuming he's going to be the guy who really gets a bigger role as well as a second year player, who they liked out of the draft. As at safety. Yeah, it should be interesting. I mean, the reality is this is kind of a great situation for Kansas City, even if they didn't have an elite quarterback, because of all of those young players, like young contributors that they're basically paying nothing for. They kind of have like a second rookie contract window almost because of that draft they had last year. Although I didn't love this offseason.
Yeah. Yeah, even if you didn't love the offseason, you can't hate the results of what they had in the past. I mean, we talked about how bad this defense was at times a couple years ago. All of a sudden you look at it like L'Jarius needs a really nice outside corner to have. Trent McDuffie had a very, very good rookie season. You look at that linebacker core with Nick Bolton at 23, Willie Gay Jr. at, how old is he now, 25? And, you go through that list. That's a nice linebacker core with Chris Jones, with all these pieces. There's all of a sudden quickly a very nice core of defense here for Kansas City as well.
Yeah. The Chargers are next up on the list. I put J.C. Jackson. To me, that's the question. Seems like his rehab is going okay. If you remember, got paid a huge deal after being a great player by the Patriots. It's very rare a player of his caliber hits the open market. Everyone's saying, Bill Belichick, what are you doing? Played 244 snaps. It was terrible. He legitimately didn't even look like an NFL player when he was out there. Got injured. And so if he can come back and be J.C. Jackson and be great with Asante Samuel Jr., who I thought really showed some flashes at developing in his second year, this could be a potentially great defense. You think about the way that this defense is designed to have stars, the way that Brandon Staley likes to have that work. You have the edge rusher tandem of Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. Like, they're never going to stop the run well. They don't want to stop the run well. They're actively trying to not stop the run well. But if they could be a great, pass stopping team with this offense that has potential to be very good, the Chargers could be great. So to me, JC Jackson is a huge question.
The wild thing is, too, is they were top 10 in defensive dropback EPA last year. And that's with paying a crap ton of money to a corner who barely played.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine if JC Jackson bounces back and is good next year with Derwin James, with Asante Samuel Jr., all those pieces? All of a sudden, you're looking at one of the better secondaries in football. So it could be huge to add a guy like JC Jackson back into this defense because, like you said, they're never going to be elite at stopping the run. And shockingly, the Sebastian Joseph Day and a couple other guys' signings did not make
Austin
them
Johnson.
an elite. Yeah, did not make them an elite run defense. I wonder who was saying that all offseason.
Who'd have thought?
But it'll work if you have a top 5 secondary in football, right? Like, it's okay to be bad stopping the run if you're also elite against the pass, which they have a potential of being if JC Jackson bounces back. So I agree. That is a big question. It was not my biggest question, but I think it is a huge question because the way this defense works is they start from the secondary up, and this secondary has to be better. Even better.
Yeah, no, very fascinating. Is this a great example of why, hey, if you have a need, don't just go out and spend money on that need willy-nilly just because you have the need? Like, with the defensive, getting not very good interior defensive linemen and paying them $10 million a year. Like, maybe don't just do whatever to fix that need. Maybe still be smart about it.
Yeah, that would help. That would help. I agree. Being smart about things generally works out well, not just in football, but in life. Better to be smart about things than not smart.
We are this is the pro being smart podcast. So we do as we say, not as we do.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely don't do as we do.
Yeah, people are like, we heard your Zach Wilson takes. Clearly, this is not a pro being smart podcast.
Yeah, I would agree with that. My biggest question for the Chargers is, will these offensive changes work? There's a lot of talent assembled on this offense. And if you look across it, they had another receiver, which I thought was nice because Keenan Allen and Mike Williams got hurt. But the play calling was such a disaster last year. And I thought Justin Herbert really propped this offense up a lot better than what it was last season. And a lot of that was because he has superhuman traits. If it's a better play calling with Kellen Moore, can this team make the leap? Because everything we just said about the defense is true. They need this defense to play better to compete at the highest level. But at the end of the day, this team's winning games through its offense. And they've assembled a really nice offense. And they can't have lackluster play calling with it.
Yeah. The other question I think you could argue is the Trey Pipkins of it all, the other guard who, looks like, with Slater back, 4 very good offensive linemen, but Pipkins, who he's not terrible. Like, he's someone who, like, he's probably a top 64 tackle in the league, but he's probably, like, not much better than that. So, he's someone who actually I just PFF has him ranked right at 64. So there you go. That's kind of where he's at. So it's like not a disaster, but that's a weakness that maybe could be concerning potentially. So I guess that's one other thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. All right. The Raiders. I wrote their entire defense other than Max Crosby.
That sounds about right. I said, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, as soon as this team becomes close to being interesting, every time they go and just punch us right in the face and say, no fun. I don't understand what's going on here. They've got like 4 decent players and then they got a bunch of scraps. I don't understand what the point of this team is. What exactly is your long-term goal here? I just don't see the plan. I don't see the course of execution here other than you've assembled a very Josh McDaniels looking offense, which I don't know how much that's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to be a mess. Like, I don't think they're going to go in and like not be able to win any games. I think their offense should be solid. I kind of like the offense, but like the defense, it just seems really concerning. And again, you think about a team that you have Josh Jacobs, debatably the best running back in football, Devontae Adams, debatably the best wide receiver in football, and Max Crosby. I'm sure there's some people who debate him as the best edge rusher in football, but he's at least that elite tier. But they just can't really, you have usually the difficult thing is getting the core and then building around the core. Like they pretty much have a core other than the quarterback. It's but then I don't know. They just kind of they did. I've never seen a team do this. What the Raiders did. I don't think I've ever seen a team do like this. Like we're gonna intentionally just get like move back one space.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seemed bizarre because like they did all that to trade for Adams, and then you know the offensive line's what Colton Miller and 4 Pringles chips basically. Like I just don't understand how this team's supposed to succeed. And yeah, the defense. This is another team where I said it a little bit about the Vikings last week, and that might have been a little unfair. This could legitimately be the worst defense in football next year. And they have
Yeah.
a premier player at probably the premium position in the league. They have Max Crosby, they have Nate Hobbs. Is there any other blue chippers on this team? I don't really think there are, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I don't love any of these guys.
I think we did this in another podcast. I think Daniel Carlson was the other one.
Yeah. But defensively, specifically, outside of Hobbs or Crosby,
Right.
like, are you excited about anybody?
You're not excited about number 1 corner Duke Shelley?
No.
You're not excited about maybe Chandler Jones? He can catch a pass from Jacoby Myers.
He can't catch a pass for Jacoby Myers. Thank you. Now they're teammates. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not too excited about it.
Jerry Tillery breakout season.
I don't know. This is rough. It's rough for linebacker core. There's no safeties. How did you trade? How did you cut Jonathan Abrams and get worse at safety?
A fair question. That's the real question. Biggest question for the Raiders. How did they do that?
Yeah, I don't know. Why are Raiders fans getting mad in the chat right now? Like, you can't be excited about this defense. There's no way you can look at this defense and be excited.
They'll be interesting. The Raiders are always interesting.
Yeah, sure, interesting. That doesn't mean good. Like,
no,
come on, like.
But I don't think they'll be a mess.
Here.
I just think that they basically intentionally said our ceiling is 9 wins for as long as we keep doing this.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't even know. I just don't see how they get stops this year.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be tough.
If you ran the ball away from Crosby the entire game, you'd probably score 40 points because that's how bad everything else is.
Yeah. CJ says put some respect on Marcus Epps. Fine. Sure.
He's all right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. The Broncos. This is an obvious one for me. It's even the thumbnail. Can Sean Payton fix this team?
Yeah. I just said, can you save Russell Wilson? But it's in the same vein.
Yeah.
I mean, they paid Sean Payton a lot of money to fix this team. And the thing is like, I don't think this roster is bad.
Right.
They're bad in key spots.
Mm-hmm.
And like, they don't have elite receivers. Like, they have good receivers. They don't have elite receivers, except for Tim Patrick, who's now healthy. So,
there you go.
They have Surtain. Okay. So if you look at, if you say the key positions in football are quarterback, receiver, corner, edge rusher, who are you really banking on outside of Patrick Surtain to be good?
Frank Clark.
Yeah.
I kind of like that signing, to be honest. But, I mean, obviously, he's not going to be like an elite edge rusher.
I mean, him and Randy Gregory are nice flyers, right? Like,
yeah.
Those are 2 guys you can really kind of say, okay, take a chance on them. Outside of that, though, I don't know. If you say those are the key positions in the game, you basically have Surtain, and then you kind of like Garrett Bowles, and you kind of like Randy Gregory. That kind of just feels like it.
Yeah, and I would say their defense was legitimately great last year. I mean, the way that it was able to keep them in games they had no business being in was great. And I think that the optimistic side of me for the Broncos says Sean Payton is one of the few coordinators out there who seemingly can coach up a bad receiving core. Feel like very few guys can do that. Usually if your receiving core sucks, your offense is going to suck. That just is what it is. He's one of the few guys who's actually had success with not the best receiving cores. Listen, I think, if this receiving core is healthy, it's not a bad receiving core at all. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, and Tim Patrick are a fine 1-2-3 combo. It's just, they struggled to stay healthy last year. So I think that the hope is that if guys can get open consistently, can Russell Wilson get back to being Russell Wilson? And if that happens, there's other holes in this roster, but there's very few rosters that don't have the holes. That's what can allow this team to look like a real contender, like we thought they might be after last season.
Yeah. I mean, there's a chance. And, just touching on that receiver core too, like, it's like, Sutton has played like a top 20 receiver before. It's been a few years, but he's played at that level. Jerry Jeudy has pedigree. It wouldn't shock me if Jerry Jeudy does take a leap under Sean Payton. So maybe that works, but yeah, I mean, it has to be seen. It's still theoretical with those guys, and like you said, if they can play better, Russell Wilson will play better. If Russell Wilson plays better, this team's going to be a lot better because, like you said, they are good on the defensive side of the ball, but you really need this offense to take a leap forward.
Yeah, they also did spend a bunch of money getting Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey, the two offensive linemen, to try to build up, which should be a good offensive line, except for Lloyd Cushenberry. Why did the Broncos do this? Where they just drafted a third-round center and they said, we're just going to have this guy be our franchise center. Like, he hasn't been like anything special or anything. They're just like, this is our strategy.
This is the year he takes the lead, man. Here it comes. Better watch out.
He's not terrible. I just find it so funny how they just like put this, literally the least amount of research. They just wrote their name on the test and handed it in.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It'll be interesting. But yeah, I mean, there are pieces, like, would it shock you if this team wins 11, 12 games next year?
No. That's definitely, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if this team becomes a championship contender next year. Like, I'd be surprised a little bit, but like, it wouldn't be like crazy. Like, I can easily see it. If you told me the Broncos play in the AFC Championship game next year, I'd be like, oh, okay, Sean Payton, like, Sean Payton kind of got Russell Wilson back to being Russell Wilson, and the defense played really well.
Yeah, that's what you'd have to bank on, which isn't a guarantee with Russell Wilson, but I don't know. It feels like crazy things that happen. I mean, it's just crazy what happened to Russell Wilson these last 2 years, especially last year. It's got to be better. Otherwise, this is another one where, kind of like Cleveland, where if he's bad again this year, what do? It's over, right? You're just screwed.
Yeah, I think we didn't talk enough about how Nathaniel Hackett didn't even make a full season as a head coach. Like, that basically never happens. Urban Meyer was like a weird exception. Like, that almost never happened where a coach doesn't even get a full year and a coach who didn't kick kickers.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it certainly was a concerning development. And he got a job almost immediately, too. That's the best part. He just got hired and nobody cared. Oh, great hire by the Jets. Getting the guy who couldn't make it 5 months with his team.
Well, this sort of Aaron Rodgers. It's being Aaron Rodgers' friend is a pretty good, pretty good spot to be in. Pretty good career path.
Oh man, really? I don't know. I guess Aaron Rodgers, if you're available, I wouldn't mind a cup of coffee. I could use a job.
Yeah, maybe you'll get on Skip and Shannon that way.
Oh God, I take it back.
Yeah. That is our show. Everyone, Kyle, let me know if you can find us on Twitter before we head out.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. That is at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Gronin, and make sure to follow the account page at On the Sideline JK at On the Sideline JK.
Of course, you like audio only podcast. Anywhere you get the audio only anywhere you get your podcast, search On the Sideline podcast. It should be available there. Kyle, you want to do a little bit of we had 2 sports end in the past couple of days. You want to talk about hockey and basketball for a bit?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Let's get into it. Which one do you want to start with?
Let's start with the NBA for a bit. I think that there's, I know you follow this very closely. So I guess I don't know. Where do you want to start with this?
I mean, this has to be considered one of the most impressive playoff runs of recent memory, right? Like, obviously, you could go LeBron's in a different stratosphere. When we talk about LeBron James, like, it's just a different conversation comparing him to normal people. But there is not very many opportunities where we see a guy lead the NBA playoffs in points, rebounds, and assists. Like,
yeah,
it was that impressive. And, I think there's all of a sudden become a revisionist history where it's like, oh, well, they played 3 play-in teams. Of course they were going to dominate. And it's just like, okay, obviously that Lakers team was a lot different than the team that would have been the 7th best team in the West. Like, obviously the Heat went on this crazy run and rightfully got to the NBA finals because of it. To say that it was just because they played play-in teams, I feel like it's disingenuous to what the Nuggets did and how impressive they were in this postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone will say like there's always an element of luck to winning a championship. Like, sure, you could argue that it's lucky, but at the same time, like you said, yeah, I don't see why Boston would have fared that much better.
Oh,
Clearly,
they would have crushed Boston. They would have beat them in 4 games too. I mean, that team.
uh
I never that team's so small minded right now. I can't stand them.
Okay. Well, I didn't realize I stepped hot button issue there with that. But just as a whole, I don't know. So how do we view? I feel like when Giannis won his championship, we kind of all said, okay, it's Giannis's league now. This is his. He's the next guy. Is Jokic that guy now?
It feels like it's definitely a conversation. It would be hard to argue against Jokic as the best player in the league right now. I mean, I think it's hard to have this conversation now because for so long, like I said, for so long we put LeBron at the top of the league and said there's no debate. And like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't a debate. He was the best player in the league. He could, do everything you needed to on a basketball court. Any counter you have for him, he had an answer for it. I think now we're living in a post LeBron world, even though he's still in the league. He's not the best player in the league anymore. Where okay, there's not this undisputed guy who's got absolutely zero fatal flaws. Like as good a defense as Jokic played in the postseason, there still are a few flaws in his game, especially like I think quicker guards still give him issues. That's why he had so much trouble in that Warriors series last year. I know Murray and all those guys were injured last year. He still has some defensive issues that I think could be attacked by certain teams. Giannis, I think, has some issues in the half court on offense. And that's why they struggled at the end of games this season because they couldn't execute down the stretch in games because his jump shot just isn't there. It's not an effective jump shot. It's not a good half court offense. It's a bit of a problem. To me right now, I think you could disguise some of Jokic's flaws easier. And I think that's what probably puts him over the top as the most dominant player in the league because offensively, there's no stopping him. It just seems like there's no counter to what he can do. And then you can mask a little bit of his mistakes on defense.
Yeah. As for the other side, with the Heat, Jimmy Butler got. I saw people giving him some criticism after a tough Game 5 performance. What are your thoughts? I mean, because Jimmy Butler's kind of thing, right, is that he's the guy who shows up in the big moments. So does this hurt him at all that he had a bad game in clinching a loss?
I don't know. Like, I can't really blame him for it. I just didn't think they were a good enough team all
Mm-hmm.
postseason. Like, I picked against them every round. Like,
Yeah.
so it's just like they won a lot of games because Jimmy Butler played out of his mind, which he is a very good player. He was second team All NBA. So by metrics or by voting, he was a top 10 player in the league this year. So he's a
Mm-hmm.
very good player. And Miami got unbelievably hot from the 3-point line this postseason. Those are the two things that led to their success, along with playing good physical defense, which they do every year. So, like, do I blame him for, being so good for 3 rounds to get this Miami Heat team to the finals and falling short there? I don't know if I can really blame him for that. Like, his body broke down, it seemed like, and they took advantage of the opportunity that was given for them.
Yeah, I also thought too, it's like some of these plays, like people were getting on him for like these missed passes, but it's like some of it was like when there's nowhere, it's almost like what we talk about in football, right? When your receivers aren't getting open, like you're not going to look good. Like when you can't
Yeah.
get the ball to anybody, like yeah, you're gonna have some turnovers.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely that late game turnover to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, that was a bad turnover. And I
Hmm.
thought by the end of the postseason, he wasn't looking to get his layup as much. Like he would drive and then look to pass rather than
Hmm.
take his shot sometimes, which I think played a part in it. But at the same time, like I can't hate on him that much when he got to this point when I literally picked against them every round. Like, how much can
Yeah.
I hate on it when they did that? When they blow their 3-0 lead to Boston and he goes and beats their ass in game 7. How much can I
Hmm.
really hate Jimmy Butler after all that?
Yeah. Did you even have who'd you pick, the Bulls or the Heat?
The Bulls. I actually bet Chicago that night,
Okay,
because I was
gotcha.
so out, they were so bad in that Hawks game, the Heat, and I was just like, there's no way they're going into Chicago and beating them. And then Chicago's up in that game late in the
Right.
game. It's just like we were very close to Chicago being in that playoff spot. And how much does that change everything we have about this team, which is so weird about this Miami Heat team, because very much like the Tennessee Titans, this team just never seems to die. Year after year, they're right back here in the conversation.
Yeah. We could talk about the hockey as well. Just, tough. First off, my heart goes out to anyone who's listening who's a Panthers and Heat fan who had to deal with their teams losing and back to back. I would just, if that happened to me, I would not be podcasting for a while.
Yeah, that was I guess they get lost from both in 5 games, so maybe it's, it heals it a little bit. They had no chance.
Maybe. I don't know. I do think about too. It's like, so that means you lost 8 games in a span of like 12 days?
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
tough.
I'm pretty sure it was something along the lines of the Heat lost. I'm trying to think of the number, because they finished the season 3-7,
Okay.
and we're in the NBA Finals because they lost 3 straight to Boston, won Game 7, or no, they finished the season 2-7 because they lost
Yeah.
to Boston, won Game
Uh-huh.
7, and then
Mhm.
lost in 5. So yeah,
Right.
I mean that's a bizarre thing to say for a team that was in the NBA Finals. They lost a
Mhm.
lot of games. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, I mean Florida looked a little outmatched, and then I mean once Chuck wasn't healthy, this was 100% over, right?
Yeah, and really, I think I don't know, it felt like, I mean, Vegas is just such a good team. Like Vegas, I think the issue is the Panthers kind of, we see this happen a lot. Actually, it's a weird thing where, like, I remember Montreal did this, where like they basically said, okay, we're gonna just not make mistakes. We're just gonna play safe hockey, and then once you make a mistake, we'll counter and we'll try to win that way, and we have a good goaltending. And that was their way they got to the Stanley Cup final. And then they played Tampa Bay, who's like, okay, we're also not going to make mistakes, and we're just more talented than you. And then that series was over from the jump. We've seen it happen several times where this is the case. I thought that was kind of the Panthers' strategy a lot of the time was Bobrovsky was playing well, and they just they were a counterattacking team. Like they took advantage of Toronto's mistakes, especially. That was a real way that they were able to win. And you play Vegas, who just doesn't make a ton of mistakes and capitalizes just as well as the Panthers do. And it was just Vegas. I said kind of all playoffs long was never getting the credit they deserve. Now they don't care about the credit because they had the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, that Florida run was so special. We just forgot about Vegas mowing through everybody in the West, right?
Uh
That's
huh.
kind of what it felt like. Drew brings up an interesting point too. Like the Panthers, equally like the Heat, could have very easily just missed the playoffs entirely and made this run at the finals. So it was just a bizarre postseason all around. Like you expected more out of hockey, but what a wild June. What a wild month.
Yeah. No. Absolutely, absolutely insane. And for the Knights, what you have 6 years in the league, 4 conference championships, 2 finals appearances, and now a win. Incredible stuff.
That's going to be one of the best operations run in the league, right?
Uh huh.
In
Well,
the
I mean,
in
one of the more
sports.
ruthless
Yeah.
ones too.
Yeah. I mean, it's impressive what they did. And I mean, they keep accumulating talent. They should keep this going for a long time.
Yeah, kind of cool that Marchessault got the Conn Smythe too. The Panthers gave him in the expansion draft to Vegas. So yeah, in hindsight, might have liked to have that one back if you're the Panthers.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Yeah, yeah, but and I guess we gotta watch baseball now, right, Kyle?
Yeah, I guess so. I was at a game on Sunday. That was fun. Went to Red Sox Yankees at Yankee Stadium.
Okay.
Red Sox won in extra innings. That was good.
Were you wearing a
Um,
Red Sox jersey?
I was wearing one of those shirt jerseys. I had a David
Okay.
Ortiz one.
Were you not?
So,
I think I'd be a little nervous.
there was some hecklers, but
Mm-hmm.
nothing serious. There was actually a Red Sox fan worse than me in front
Okay.
of me. So
Gotcha.
I was like, okay, they're going to beat up that guy, if anything. So I'm not too worried.
Right. Yeah. I think I'd want to at least like I don't know, bring like a jacket with me.
Yeah.
You
This
can put
Red Sox
over.
team's not very good, but, it
Uh-huh.
was fun to be there.
And neither
The
are the Yankees. So.
that lineup is rough, man. That lineup is difficult to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They scored 2 run. What's that?
I was just gonna say. I'll go. You go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say they scored 2 runs in the game. I think off of only 3 or 4 hits. The first was they had a runner on first, and Billy McKinney hits this flare to right field that bounces off the dirt perfectly and spins over the foul ball wall for a ground rule double. Sits up second and third with 2 outs. Jose Trevino grounds one up the middle that bounces off second base and goes into the outfield for a base hit that drives in both runs. That's how they scored both runs in that game.
It's great stuff. Yeah, Drew said, Jackson, you like the Rays? Yes, I like the Rays, and the Rays they've been all right this year. What drives me crazy though is like this drives me way more insane than it should. But the stupid all-star fan voting deciding who gets to be the starters in the thing. You have like Wander Franco, who's leading the league in WAR, who's currently not gonna start the All-Star game. Randy Rosarena isn't gonna start the All-Star game because everyone in Canada is voting for all the Toronto players.
Yeah. You got to galvanize those Floridians to vote. Get them out and vote. Tell them it's like a presidential election. They'll be out.
Yeah, well, that would work. Yeah, but we don't. I don't know. I think most of the people in Florida that watch the Rays are already voting. I don't think that's moving the needle too much.
Yeah. You guys are good. You got a really good pitching staff. You've hit the heck out of the ball. Shane McClanahan's elite. I mean, it's hard to pick against you guys right now, unless you're saying this pitching staff's going to cool off, I guess, right? What'd you think of the Cillian Murphy, Tyler Glasnow lookalike thing?
It's been a thing I've heard. It's been a thing for a while now. Yeah, I guess I see it.
Yeah. I like Cillian Murphy. I like Glasnow too, but
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think it's one of his actors. I'm like, yeah. I don't think I've ever watched a movie because of him.
I don't know. I really enjoy him as an actor. I think he's really good. I've enjoyed every movie he's been in.
Okay, well, there you go. Ringing endorsement. And I like Tyler Glasnow too.
Yeah, he's a good pitcher. I'm glad that he's healthy. That's the big thing.
Yeah. I mean, because again, you think about if McClanahan and Glasnow are healthy, and this offense can be as good as it is. I mean, that's a team that could actually do something in the playoffs.
Yeah, if you went through the deep minds of Google, you could probably find something from Belly Up Sports after his first MLB start, where I said Shane McClanahan has Cy Young stuff.
There you go.
So, looks like a few years later, but it looks like I'm kind of smart.
Okay, well, we'll see how it works. We'll see if the Red Sox can turn the season around.
Nope.
Next week, we will be doing the NFC edition of this show, and we'll be a deep dive into every single baseball team and where they're currently at.
Can't wait. Let's get into it. Looking forward to next week.
Yes, okay, of course, everyone. Thanks for watching or listening. We appreciate it. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.